Humans are such a funny little species. Thousands of years they've had gods, all types of them, all pantheons, all sorts of them. Yet they can't resist creating new ones all the time. Pop culture has created thousands of small gods of their own, or reimagined existing gods. So they had to bring an expert on omnipotence in. Now, humans are very interested in the fact they have the imagination necessary to create all of these beings. Unlike Klingons and Vulcans, just thinking of Vulcan gods between them. So the question becomes, what does modern gods look like? What have they done different from the rest of all of this? Now, I'll assume most of you can't follow along. So I'll be writing part of this down so you primates can follow along at home. What's everybody's favorite pop culture show or comic book or property that has some sort of gods? Give me one. Because if you don't, I'm going to say Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
We've seen a couple episodes of that.
Why have you not seen the whole series yet? The entire pinnacle of humankind was built to create Buffy the Vampire Slayer and a poor spinoff called Angel later. How have you not seen it all yet?
I can see that it's a good show, and I've watched a couple of episodes, probably 3, maybe 4, probably. And I can see that it's a good show, and I do want to watch it. But I have a unique perspective of pissing people off when I say I haven't watched it yet. So that.
What a fine human. What a fine human. He just doesn't watch an important show like that only to piss people off.
I don't want to say that.
So what?
I haven't watched it either.
There's lots of people.
Okay, you I'm really disappointed in.
There's lots of people out there who are like usually with some sort of southern drawl involved or over 50. Like, I never even heard about it. Something like that. But see, I should have watched it, but I don't. On principle.
Fair enough. I've never seen Titanic.
I only love the entire series.
So what?
I love up to 10.
Apparently a lot of people, most of them female.
I own both series.
Oh, Angel and Buffy. And Angel's horrible.
It's
Horrible
but
knockoff.
tough, but yeah.
Okay, beyond that, pick a series, except for American Gods. Don't do American Gods because I haven't read the book yet.
Okay.
Sorry. Haven't got to it yet.
Battlestar Galactica.
Battlestar Galactica.
Which version? Never seen that. New one. Yeah, the first episode of the new one. The miniseries. Got all that in Caprica. This is the first one though.
Do you know the gods?
Third. Rowan, Mercury, Apollo.
And then the Lords of Cobalt.
Yeah.
Yep. Describe them for me.
A lot different than what we believe.
Just give me a quick overview. Assume I've never seen the new Battlestar Galactica.
You want me to talk? You talk lightly and can't.
So what?
Exactly.
I can't hear you. You'll have to speak up.
Well, there's many gods. And there's 12 colonies. One named after every Zodiac character, I think it is, or I don't know how to say that. Pisces, Caprica, and they have a problem with subscribing to the idea of only one God.
Yes, they're a polytheistic society.
And they're like, how can one God choose what's right and wrong for everybody.
Interesting take on it.
Because we think of it the other way.
Right. How could you have 12 gods and all of them?
And how can a person who doesn't believe in God have morals?
Yeah. We'll not get into that.
Okay.
They've got their own god anyways. Fine spaghetti monster. Give it 1,000 years, it'll reinforce them. So what type of gods are they? Are they all powerful? Are they just humans that have been elevated to gods?
On that one, it's kind of difficult to say because they talk about how that Apollo's arrow and stuff like that, and they didn't really get into all of that per se. They kind of just leave it out there for
people to just kind of mull over on there.
Mm-hmm.
From my understanding, for the most part, yes, it follows along with existing ones because, of course, this is a spoiler for those who haven't seen the show. Because in reality, they were in our past, come back, colonize Earth, probably all died anyways. And then things like the Zodiac are little signs of what they had been. The gods they had were eventually adopted by humans and changed a little bit over time. Again, I apologize to anybody who's not seen the entire series to know that. You aren't missing anything. I honestly have not watched it. I have no desire to. I watched the original. It was great. It was great. It was horrible, horrible sci-fi. It was amazing. And then they tried to do something real with it. Somebody else throw out another one. I got
Stargate, but it's the same sort of situation.
right. Stargate steals from every pantheon, every pantheon, because you have the Egyptians, of course, which heavily factor heavily into all of it, and then you have each of the different pantheons have shown up in the show somewhere along the way. They do create some unique gods along the way. People who didn't exist as part of the original Egyptian pantheon. But for the most part, the other thing is their gods are a particular type of god. There are so many ways to classify gods. Tons of them. You can classify, and there's actual naming schemes for these things. The problem is none of them are what I want for this. We're going to kind of throw something together. Okay. This one, there'll be some Christians that would get really upset about using the term living God for a reason. But these are corporeal beings that are just really powerful. Stargates falls to corporeal beings that are really powerful. They're not really actually anything special. They just happen to have a lot more oomph than everybody else.
They're like aliens.
Yes, and actually, for a number of the various mythos, modern gods mythos, it is just aliens. Q Continuum are all just a bunch of aliens in a lot of ways. Just have to be more powerful than everybody else. this is my own personal scale for it. Sort of gods. Sort of gods are the Egyptians had a lot of sort of gods. They were kings, they were rulers. And when they died, they simply disappeared. They were sort of gods because their existence did not continue beyond. They didn't have, there was no immortality involved, no nothing. And upon the end of their existence, nobody even worshipped them. They simply ceased to be. There's records of some Egyptian gods that were that way. Living gods, like I described, really powerful people. Not necessarily anything special, they're just really powerful. Gods, well, they're classically think of Thor. Norse mythology, we always hear of Odin and Thor and all of these guys in a particular way. Odin rides a horse with 8 legs and has 1 eye. Actually, Odin could appear as anything he wanted to. Odin wasn't actually a corporeal being. Odin could assume any form he wanted to. Most of the time, he walked the earth as an old guy with gray beard, long gray hair, with a staff and long robes, who looked kind of like a baby.
Or happy. But
Was that Thor that did that, or was that Odin? I don't remember.
he was trying to trick people.
All powerful gods. All powerful gods. These are Q Continuum, the O Continuum, the P Continuum, the M Continuum. Them, that's just from Star Trek. There's all sorts of them. Okay, I'll admit. Most of those references you'll only get if you actually be geeky enough to read the books.
I never learned to read.
Good for you. Better for the rest of us, actually. Because the last thing an electrician needs is an education.
I know.
Because eventually they'll wise up and go, I ain't getting shocked anymore. Small gods. Small gods. Actually stealing this concept a little bit, but it actually has been applied in history too, from Terry Pratchett.
Their uncle.
So what?
Their uncle gnome.
Let's describe your gods, the washer and dryer. They can be omnipotent, omnipotent, as long as you're in the washer and dryer. Go with Terry Pratchett, the god Om, the all-powerful god Om. All-powerful is as long as it's in his church. These are the small gods, the little everyday things that we've elevated. Anybody else got another book, TV, anime? No, don't do anime. That's just too weird. We don't need all the tentacles. Books, TVs, movies, comic books. Anybody else got another area for us to play in? Otherwise, it's going to be Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I'm telling you. What?
D&D. It's a game.
Which? What? Hang on.
It's a game.
Hang on. Which section of D&D?
Well,
Because there's the core modules,
yeah.
then there's Dragonlance, and
Forgotten Realms.
Forgotten Realms. Okay. I think I actually have a list for that. We'll see in a moment. Because the cool part of like Forgotten Realms is you have the entire list. Entire list is represented.
They have different levels.
Yeah. Forgotten Realms. Ha! I do have a list. So they have the entire thing. They're not particularly unique.
Well, they stole from history too.
They stole from history too. And then most of these are stolen from history. Terry Pratchett, one of the reasons why I like that little small guy thing is because it's one of the few times where you see somebody actually rethink this a little bit. You know, what happened if the things we believed in actually happened? Dragonlance, Forgotten Realms, and all of those, Forgotten Realms in particular, is just a lifting. In fact, to the point, you could draw diagrams. this guy actually represents this guy. This guy actually represents this mythos. This guy actually represents this mythos. However, don't tell any players that because they get really, really upset if they're big on Forgotten Realms. I'm not saying I've had this conversation before, but I might have had this conversation before to really bad luck. Nope. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. Which edition? Because apparently
Let's go with 3.5.
3.5 already.
Because yeah, they changed from edition to edition. There was even this time frame where they were all supposed to come down and wreck the world.
8.25.
And basically, it was an excuse for why the gods changed from 2 to 3.
What year was that? Take place. Got my eye twitching.
This is something that's unique and different between fiction,
Yeah.
between modern fiction.
I like that. Short.
Because they had Dracula and Anya.
The historical tapes.
The historical documents.
That's Galaxy Quest. That does not count here. Revisionism.
Yeah.
Because they did, in the span of a couple of years, actually 10 years, I guess it is, between 2 and 3. I think it's about 10 years between the two, isn't it? Harvey, you're an expert. What was the time frame? The time between second edition and introduction of third?
The time of troubles, was it? I don't remember how long that covered.
Because it ended up covering back in the real world, is actually what we're referring to release dates. I'm thinking of something like 12 years in between them, 10, 12 years between the release of these products. Anyways, going on with the point though. See, normally mythologies take hundreds or thousands of years before
Which I guess I can throw out Babylon 5 right now. They had that one episode where deconstructing something is the name of the title, and they basically did 100 years after Sheridan and Dylan.
yeah.
500 years, 1,000 years, 1,000,000 years, and basically where they all fit in and how they became gods and stuff.
That's true. I hadn't thought about that. It's been a long time since I watched. Obviously, been a very long time since I watched Babylon 5. But I that was one of them I watched all the way through. It was a fantastic show. So usually we go from the idea of something simple like pulling the sun, without a whole lot of description behind it. You have to, if you look back at the anthropology of these things were very simple. But slowly but surely over time, they become less and less simple. Very complicated concepts. Revisionism in modern mythology can happen in the span of about 12, 13 years. Completely redo it, just simply because somebody else wants to tell a different tale, or somebody wants to get rid of the mistakes they made in their previous edition, or a number of things like that. So you end up with the idea of all this history that would normally happen on its own, happening very, very quickly in short periods of time. Or the opposite happens. We'll pick on Thor for a minute. So remember, who is Thor?
Comic book character. Sorry.
He's an electrician.
Very,
Basically, I'm Thor.
very crude
You don't have a
electrician.
hammer. You don't need a hammer.
That's what linemen's are for.
Exactly. I do have a hammer, but I rarely use it.
Sometimes you're not worthy of the hammer. Smaller not.
No, I'm always worried. Yeah, I know where I know every tool in my bag. My tool bag. My tool bag. Thor.
Oh my, what lovely and rustic architecture.
Oh, that wood paneling. Fantastic. Greatest human invention ever, wood paneling. Thor. Destroy it.
Powerful for the markers.
Apparently so. Thor, God of Thunder.
In the source of Thursday.
It's not actually one of his powers, per se.
I know.
It's not like you said,
I
praise be to me, all Thursdays shall be mine. No. God of Thunder is this fantastic thing because every culture has a God of Thunder. Every culture has a God of Thunder of some sort. Or at least has at one time. Because it's powerful, it scares us. It put humans back in their cave every time they heard it because something was wrong. So at one time, the descriptions from some of these guys were nothing more than he's the son of Odin and he controls thunder because Thor sounds a little like thunder. Just little things like this, but over time.
Thunder. God is angry. That is the only conceivable reason for the story.
I prefer the bowling. God is bowling, and he's really good. You can hear him get another strike.
Spare me.
Oh, he always picks up the spare.
There's no need to pick up the spare. Not he's always on strike. Protector of the buffets.
Protector of the buffets. Serious dog.
I wanted to go to the Golden Crown or something. Now I'm just thinking alive. We've all seen that, right? There's a little skit about the god of Tetris. Okay, I'll have to cue that and watch it.
Thor starts out as this, by the way. Nobody knows actually for certain where Thor started out from. Because the entirety of history. No, I didn't start with you. I've seen the past, it didn't start with you. The entirety of history for this is lost in reality. Everything there is about Thor, about Odin, about all of these old Norse gods can be attributed to one guy who happened to finally write it down in 1300, which, by the way, is after Christianity showed up. So, by the way, there's a lot of pollution between the two.
Yeah.
We know they existed before then. There's signs of them that are much, much older. Nobody knows for certain, but they think it looks a little like this, which is it starts out with the god of thunder. And then slowly he gains his attributes over time. He becomes a warrior. Well, great warriors need great weapons. So that's the gift of the gods. More. Then he becomes the protector of the gods. And then
Not to worry, he left his phone. He'll be back.
okay. It's abrupt. Didn't he
He didn't
begin?
let out a scream,
I don't know.
a battle cry of some sort.
No, my gear 2 disconnected all of a sudden. Usually that only happens when it leaves the range. And I'm all like, did my gear 2 just walk away? I'm charging in the car right now. Yeah, I was just like, how do I lock the door?
So eventually becomes the protector of humans, as in particularly he becomes the protector of humans from the giants. Each of the giants represents the various types of cataclysms that humans dealt with. The frost giants, etc., etc. All these things were stuff that humans had to deal with if you're a Norseman. Obviously, you didn't need a desert giant if you're a Norseman.
That would have been pretty terrifying, though. Oh my gosh, it doesn't just arrive.
What do you mean there's areas without water and cold? I just make this shit up. So now, time goes on. And we're gonna say that we're just only going across from this time period to modern time period. Really not a whole huge amount of time. Hundreds of years, 700, 800 years. But now we get to the comic book guy, who, well, he kind of represents us a little bit. I mean, he's hyper masculine now. The whole concept, for instance, that he could take any shape he wanted to, that's gone. No point behind it anymore. The hammer, there's no real backstory to his hammer in the comic books anymore. He's just, or should say,
Expected to have it. Wouldn't recognize Thor without it.
comic book movie guy. Let's make a little bit of separation here. Because this version of him is actually a little weirder than this version. Comic book version of the guy is stranger in a lot of ways, because this Thor was always the same entity. The comic book guy at one time was a crippled kid who happened to be able to become. We'll get into those in a bit, because those are fun. Special sorts of fun.
Conversation.
Modern gods.
So we get to the comic book movie guy. He's actually pretty two-dimensional. All of the things that happen to make him, I'm not going to say real, but to make him more 3D, to make him have more depth, all the backstories and all these things that were written down from here and from beyond there, kind of disappears, and you get this 2D cardboard cutout with a hammer.
Mm-hmm.
Oddly enough, there's a second branch to this, and to the point that there's actually a big petition going on right now.
There's a petition about the comic book guy.
Oh yes.
Oh yeah.
People
I guess
complain
he-
about anything.
I guess comic book guy is now a comic book gal.
Oh yes, yes.
Oh yeah, there's that.
I hadn't even got, because that's right here, and that got really weird, because since the comic book, it's whoever is able to wield the hammer, because the hammer is no longer just the hammer. The hammer is no longer a gift from the gods. The hammer is, in an essence, Thor. Because whoever can wield the hammer, if there is no instance of Thor in existence, suddenly becomes Thor.
So it's his phylactery.
Kind of. Miss Potter.
Well, in the D&D sense of the
Yeah, the Lich is
yeah.
phylactery. Because there's this kind of cool thing that's happened, which is modern Norse worship, which is that these are, for lack of a better term, this goes back and looks at the entire history of all of this. See, this was considered all to be a real person. This is a real entity. This revises all of that. Modern Norse worship now revises it to mean that these are stories that are allegories for various truisms of humanity, and that these are not gods that you worship. These are ideas that you explore to improve your life. And they really want Marvel to change the character because it's insensitive to their modern interpretation of this interpretation of whatever the original was. Yes, there's an actual petition that Marvel needs to be more sensitive
To Thor worship.
to Thor worship. Because, I mean, let's face it, if we would have done the same thing to Jesus.
Yeah. I'm sure that people have.
But they don't realize how far it's gotten.
I mean, there's an Italian image that lots of people worship. But they don't think of him as the comic book guy, so there is that.
Right. And
Because Jesus has brown hair with blonde specks and blue eyes and white.
yeah, and have you seen this guy? Have you seen this guy? This guy has six-pack abs, 18-inch arms, cut like no other. This is not a Viking warrior. Do you know what a Viking warrior looks like? Warriors are, they're kind of heavy, they were kind of heavy-set, dopey-looking guys.
Low centers of gravity.
So what?
Low centers of gravity.
What,
Sit on the head a lot.
what's the hobbit's name? The dwarf? His name?
Gimli.
Yeah. Kind of like that, but taller.
Tall dwarfs. What? What?
I guess I should have asked what book. I failed.
You began to speak, and I heard gibberish. So let's try that again.
I said, I guess I should have asked one book before I went all nerd ragey.
Gimli?
No, he was actually talking about the Dungeons and Dragons movie.
The Hobbit movies.
Yeah.
Not the Dungeons.
Yeah.
So not only does this stuff get revised, it gets revised in multiple directions. And of course, can anybody name an entire pantheon that got renamed once? Completely renamed in history.
Is that Greek to Greek or Greek to Roman? I forget which one it is.
Yes.
Romans.
It was, yeah.
Greeks.
Well, it was, everybody was Hellenized, so. But the Romans would just accept, whoever, you're worshiping the same gods we are, we just call them this and you call them that. And that was, they tried to translate things with whoever they found.
Well, they had a more than merrier sort of approach to pantheons.
Yeah.
Hey, I like your god. Your god's kind of cool.
Yoink.
Bring him over here. Bring him over. Series? This. So, yeah, they would read.
One talking phone is a god?
Yep, I've lost it.
Sorry.
That's all right. All right. You brought up games, so we'll throw out video games too a little bit. I hadn't originally going to.
We will never end this game. We will never end this series. It will go on forever.
Well, you know you're trapped here forever now.
Maybe you have particular games.
We'll throw a couple of them in there. World of Warcraft.
Okay.
How many gods are there in World of Warcraft?
I don't know, but they're machine gods, aren't they? They're like
Yeah, there's
old
they
machine
originally were
things.
machines.
There's all sorts.
That's where the curse of the fish.
And actually, I mean, if you want to get kind of here.
I don't do that anymore.
Very specifically things that were constructed that end up becoming gods.
We're going to have a world eater in there somewhere.
The
I guess I could throw in on maybe.
oh no, there's a reason why I'm avoiding anime. I'm avoiding anime because we can't get that weird. There's a level. There's a level of weird that you can get. And I was, I'll be honest, when I was researching all this, I went to Digimon. I had not thought of Digimon. Because Digimon, for instance, brings in Yggdrasil, World Tree, and things like that. Oh, yeah, okay. And then I started looking through all the lists. You're kidding me, right? You created all those. That's kind of, wow.
No. Just no. Just not on YouTube. Their terms of service.
Nope, that's what we want. Well, I need too many tabs with them. There we go. Come on. Pick up a particular section of World of Warcraft, the old gods, which are the original creations when the universe was created. They may have had something to do with it. They may not have. Nobody's saying. It's the old gods, the elder gods, or et cetera, and they all fall into these categories. Very mean, very ugly, very nasty things. All of them, I think all of them, are evil. For some reason, when you say old gods, or elder gods, or things like that, somehow they're always evil. They're bad if they're old. And it's odd that works out that way. Of course, you can't use elder gods without H.P. Lovecraft seeming to surface a little bit. But they do have a couple of them that were a little more in this category, like Titans and things like that. Basically, creations of the gods that end up dealing with the humans or the orcs or the et cetera, et cetera. Geez, I've already ran through an hour? Holy smokes.
Stood.
So what?
Is that what we call it? Running. It stood through an hour.
I stood through an hour already.
We go to the mall dressed like I'm
I like running into people wearing dressed like this. This has been fun already.
Yeah.
Not this time, but the previous time I went to Headshots. Pull up to a stoplight. People look over. They can't seem to process what they're looking at. It's one of those things. I'm sure it was that looks, one, very odd, two, very familiar, but I don't know what.
Can I make fun of it? This could be an actual religion.
The best part was when the cop pulled up behind me. I was waiting to be pulled over. Just waiting to be pulled over.
That's when you get my face full of, like, discrimination, racism. You got like a thick accent. Ew.
Values, teacher, God.
The other thing about the World of Warcraft gods, because we're going to get back on topic.
Dang it.
And were you driving the Joker?
Yes. Yes, I was. Because they have these sort of guys.
Give me a ticket in your sleeve, one foot to the left.
You're trying to spend the last of your life as a golden retriever.
I would wiggle my nose, but that's how I do it, Genie.
I have the theme stuck in my head now.
Yeah, I know. Okay, welcome to my world. Ever since I walked in.
You walked into the world.
Where?
Okay.
Sorry.
World of Warcraft. They had these. And it shows one of the other things that happens with the gods is the elimination of gods. See, World of Warcraft, they were at war with each other a lot of times. And there's a number of gods that were simply wiped out. They were killed by other gods. Now keep in mind, this is a relative, theory be a relatively really difficult thing to have happen. If you're talking about an all-powerful being, you obviously cannot wipe out an all-powerful being, except for when you do wipe out an all-powerful being. Apparently there's some sort of loophole to being all-powerful, that there's usually a magical item that ends up taking you out. Or gods who are immortal, except for when they're not immortal because somebody killed them. Of course, we'll go ahead and grab this one. H.P. Lovecraft had a way of dealing with that.
No, Dad, they're just sleeping.
There you go. Can anybody tell me about H.P. Lovecraft's gods without going insane?
I'm gonna try.
Oh,
It's
He sleeps beneath the waves.
gods when they died in his works, interpretation, didn't die per se. It's just that they went into sleep. They could be revived later. They could be brought back. Cthulhu. See, I've been using Buffy as a threat. Because I will go off on all sorts of tangents when I get to that one. Just everybody get up and get out of the room because I'll be going for the next couple of hours. With Lovecraft's sort of setup, all these, but even a dead god was so powerful, so unimaginably powerful. Looking upon a dead god was enough to make you lose your mind or die right there. And then for some reason, people kept thinking it was a good idea to try and bring these things back. Pretty nasty things. The humans, by the way, could have almost, but not quite, no effect on the situation. They could stop other humans, but the idea of a human versus the gods was impossible. In most of these things, humans versus gods is impossible. Well, except for when it's not.
yeah.
Because actually, there's plenty of tales, the modern tales, where humans can take out gods. Usually without much problem. We'll go with the Buffy the Vampire Slayer thing for a moment, where one of the gods was killed with nothing more than a really, really ugly hammer. This also shows one of the other things is every once in a while somebody does have kind of a new idea. See, because H.P. Lovecraft took the idea of gods, period, and just went ahead and made them all bad. Just pretty much as bad as you can get. The reason they no longer existed in some ways was to protect humanity. the reason why these things no longer could walk the earth is because if they did, we would no longer exist. Once he did this, all sorts of things started shooting off from it, including, well, little influences and stuff like World of Warcraft, pull up actually into everything such as Digimon even. Once that idea, that concept, that new idea that gods were bad, that these elder gods were a bad idea, it started populating through every other story that came out. Because now you have good gods and bad gods. Before you had gods, just gods. Woe to any human who was in between two gods who wanted to go at it, but it didn't necessarily make them more evil or less evil than the other guy. They were just all gods, and you didn't mess with them. Loki, we assume to be, we associate evil with Loki now. Loki is the god of lies and deceit. Oddly enough, that's not necessarily quite the way it was portrayed back. I don't have that one written down anymore. Back when it was written down. It's not that he wasn't the god of lies, it's that didn't necessarily make him evil. Kind of weird how that works. So we have a different
Trickster god.
So what?
He was a trickster god.
He was a trickster god. And there's a number of those. In fact, in Native American culture, there's a couple of those. You never mess with them.
The just to touch on anime.
You can't resist, can you?
No.
I told you how weird this is going to get.
No. Gods, mechas, giants, Godzilla. Just bringing that up.
Okay, but Godzilla doesn't count because Godzilla is a poor translation.
Right.
I mean, that's one of the problems with. In some ways, that's the problem with some of the different mythos. Modern gods, it's easy to identify and label down where they came from and that sort of thing. You start getting into some of the older mythos. Just like Godzilla doesn't translate over very well as for a name, some of the older gods concepts don't translate over to modern culture. In fact, that's how you end up with things like Thor as a two-dimensional hero with the cut abs and everything else, is because our modern concept of what a hero is. Were any of you here for Jody Simon talking about worldview? Wow.
I missed that one.
How did that work out? It was actually our first recorded one, I think.
I'm not sure if that was one that I was here with or the other guests that you brought in. Because there have been 2 or 3 people that you brought in.
Britt Kennedy, Michelle Drilling, which is hunger awareness.
That's one.
Okay. Which I want to bring her back someday. Jody Simon on worldview. Anyways, one of the things that she talked about, she asked about what the attributes of a superhero is. And modernly, you describe it now as being superheroes like Batman. His movies are gritty and dark and realistic for certain shades of realism. Versus Superman in the 1980s, who could do no wrong, who was almost perfection, who was all of these things. In time, same applies over very large spans of time too. And I had a point I was getting to.
30 years, changing idea of
So this is the real reason I need to take notes when I'm right on the board. Sometimes I lost where I'm at.
Gritty reboot of Superman.
Sure, we'll go with that. Heck with it. Especially because Superman is one of the characters, comic book characters, that's been referred to as a god off and on. As a matter of fact, not only that, there is a version of Superman, Superman Prime, who is flat out a god. If you've never read it, don't. It's not, no. Yeah. But that sort of revisionism, that idea that taking a character that was, say right here, it's not that Superman is not is effectively immortal, something kryptonite can kill him, something this or something that can kill him, but on his own it appears that he probably isn't going to keel over and die unless something happens to him. But he's not necessarily all powerful. That goes to the Flash, actually.
High on the yellow sun.
So what?
He gets that funky high on the yellow sun.
Yeah. But eventually somebody has to look at the story differently. They tell it a little differently, and suddenly he goes from being one of these to eventually becoming one of these.
To make more money.
Well, oddly enough, yes. See, because all of this storytelling and all that,
Nowadays, it's
about
entertainment and
yeah,
dollars.
we don't. And the truth is, to a certain degree, we don't actually know. And I will say something that to many people is absolutely horrific. We don't know which stories were told in the old days for entertainment value, for control value, for profit even, because it's not a new concept. The idea of telling a story in exchange for a quarter is not a new concept. The idea of telling stories, walking into the bar room and sitting down, everybody buys you drinks and food while you tell stories, sitting around a campfire as you move as a vagabond from place to place. All of these are not new concepts. We just took it to the extreme now. One person tells a story that millions see at once, or in the span of a couple of weekends. Profit still was a motivation for many of these. We don't really know which ones were told for profit or which ones were told because of actual belief. And this being one of the key points about discussions like this. What happens in the future when somebody runs across, say, Doctor Who? Doctor Who is actually
there's the lonely god too.
well played. I didn't know if anybody would pull that one up. So the sort of Roman family that worships him as the god of time. So Doctor Who runs its course. Then 1,000 years from now, somebody starts running across tales of a time traveler.
And having to translate it after the language has changed.
Yeah, because 1,000 years it's easy for us to imagine. 1,000 years from now, we're going to be speaking English. Of course, we're going to be speaking English. So what? Portuguese.
Portuguese.
So, of course, we'll be speaking English. It's just not going to be what we speak now, because there'll probably be 6 people in the world who speak this language, and everybody else who speaks something that be nerds. Fair point. Or anthropologists, one or the other. All these things would have to be given a cultural framework. Doctor Who makes no sense. None.
Without a culture.
Without a culture, yeah. Already, Doctor Who has lost one of the important points of Doctor Who. The idea behind having a police box was because they were everywhere in Britain.
At the time.
What doesn't exist in Britain? Police boxes. None of them. Nowhere. In fact, everybody who sees a police box in Britain should automatically be tipping it over and taking it home because it's the doctor's.
Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Particularly if it has an open form. So, if it says St. John's on it, you take that thing home. We're already just watching in that little time frame, missing some of those cultural hints. He has a telephone on the outside of the TARDIS, which has been dumb a number of times. In another generation, will people understand what that thing is?
There are people now that have trouble with, because
Have trouble.
kids, they have those phones, and they're like, why would you have it in a box that doesn't move? I mean, even if you look at like Superman, he changes in a phone booth, right?
1980s Superman, that was one of my favorite things, is he looks at the phone booth that's just only this tall on a pedestal. And I have to go find someplace else to go because the cultural pieces are missing now. So yeah, and what else? I mean, just out of Doctor Who, what else would be missing out of it just now that unless you're a Whovian wouldn't make sense? I don't really have an answer for that off the top of my head, but the police box makes no sense really in a lot of ways in modern time. The telephone sitting off the side does not make any sense anymore because that was the function of the police box at the time. Imagine in, let's just say 500 years, not even 1,000, 500 years, almost none of the cultural clues and things that happened with Doctor Who exist anymore. None of it. I mean, for all we know, Ben Big is no longer there. Big Ben may no longer be there. We can't predict these things ahead of time. So all the things like involve
watching Friends and seeing the Twin Towers.
Yeah, there you go. That's one that's a modern cultural anachronism already. You look at a movie and if you see the Twin Towers, you know what time period it was taken in. It was shot this time because those are still there, huh? There's actually been a couple of movies that apparently they have digitally altered that back and forth. Disturbing in some ways. But the question becomes, when looking upon a story like that, he'd actually kind of fall up here. That idea of a living God that was running around, actually, he'd probably be somewhere in between. Because he can at least keep coming back and reforming himself and cheating death and apparently finding a way to get another 13 regenerations. Cheaters. I'm not bitter over this. It's just wrong.
Because Q says so.
Yes. So anyways, what other things do we have in modern society that in 1,000 years, if somebody were to look it up, we wouldn't have the cultural hints necessary to realize, oh, that was a joke and it was entertainment. We have so much
Nearly
stuff.
everything. In 1,000 years, with the rate we're going, I mean, we're going like, our kids are like, what do you mean you had a phone in a box? That's crazy.
No, what do you mean you carried a phone around with you? What's a phone?
So
Because he stops, the kid
like a baby's toy.
The kid stops and thinks for a moment and accesses the mesh network. It gives them the entire thing.
what do you mean you didn't know automatically all the definitions, of everything? What do you mean you had to go to a book and pull out a dictionary and look things
Have
up?
to go to the card catalog.
What do you mean you had to do math?
Card catalogs, I've forgotten.
The
Because
you're in that.
I hated them.
So what?
Yeah.
Isn't that a DuckTale?
These are Malcolm
But yeah, we got the younger generation here. Like last week, was it? You was saying that it would be different for them.
Well, that's true because they were younger. How old are you?
I'm 35.
36.
I guess they're not that much.
No.
Okay.
Just look a little younger than you
What's up?
For some
I'm sure
reason,
it's hard living.
are.
we thought you was maybe a score plus.
No.
Not
I
almost.
thought you guys
score.
were in your 20s. I actually honestly thought you guys were
It's
in
been a
your 20s.
while.
But
See,
yeah,
I love it because we get to help out and do it. It's like, hello, music. Born in 1980.
Alrighty. So we're wrong on that one. So if we had a group that was a generation younger, and a group that was a generation older than us, for instance, we would get different answers to some of this stuff because, again, the police box, that's hilarious. These people understood it. these people go, well, yeah, that's a TARDIS. There's a generation between that at least get that it's both things. The last time I wore it, I didn't have a goatee. It makes all the difference.
Yeah, I imagine that would definitely feel different.
All right, let's pick another group. Let's pick another group. Give me a group. Except for Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
I honestly can't think of anything. I don't really do stuff with gods in them. I'm a heathen bastard. Why am I?
Except for that whole thing where you played World of Warcraft for how long?
Only a couple of weeks there
A couple of weeks.
Yeah.
at a time. So,
A little bit.
All right. There's a list here. Good point. Transformers. Transformers has two gods.
ExxonMobil and
Funny. I like it.
Vector Sigma.
well, Galactica.
And this is debatable. This is debatable because it depends on where you want to put them on the scale too. Primus, and Unicron. It had two. It had those two gods.
You're taking from that. Okay. I wasn't sure where you was going.
Well, I understand, especially with Transformers, there's different.
And then IDW and blah blah blah. And
Yes.
if you want to do Armada or
All right, pass it around here.
Yeah, I've seen that one.
Oh,
it took me a while because you guys kept on talking, so I'm like trying to pay attention, but also trying to read.
I follow that one every once in a while. It's a disturbing webcomic. I love it. Anyways, Transformers. And you get very, very distinctly good versus evil with Primus and Unicron. There's also the Chrono Architect. I don't know anything about that. This was off of somebody else's list. The Chrono Architect.
That must have been comic book
Okay.
because I don't follow it.
Because you know how much of the comic book I followed?
Well, this is a new comic, not the old comic in Marvel.
Gotcha. Because the whole comic Marvel was horrible.
I followed that one up until about maybe the 30s, and then I got drifted away.
Well, that became a game of how often can you kill Optimus Prime and bring him back, and how many different unique ways. Anyways, so you end up with another one of those things that we, as modern times,
How many times can we have the good guys sacrifice themselves for the society?
which I wonder what story that parallels. I mean, really, from a Christian standpoint, a lot of those good guy sacrifices self in exchange for saving society. Usually tends to be a parallel to Christ's story.
Mhm.
But good versus evil is kind of interesting because, again, going back in time far enough, including you can even see some of it in the Bible. We could just erase these names.
Going to use Yahweh?
Nah. Almost did. I hate to use it in this context. It's not. I don't know why. I usually do not have a problem with that, but for some reason, for this context, I didn't like it. Were the various Baal evil? We don't know, actually. Some of
But
them.
we always think of
there's
it.
not enough left of it.
Right. We don't have any, those cultural contexts. We don't got them no more. So modern day, we automatically think of this.
What was it? Building a temple and having a ditch dig around it, and 50 other people were building their altar. And is that the context,
Well, this is more of a generic
or is
context.
this?
This is more generic. I could have also said God versus the Egyptian pantheon. Because you assume, again, if God says he's going to eliminate, if he's going to take them on and eliminate them, they must be bad, right? But nothing's actually ever said from the standpoint of what are the attributes of the Egyptian pantheon in the Bible. There isn't. Never described. We don't know the god of the Nile could have been horribly evil and require human sacrifice every day. Got to pop somebody's head off and throw it in the river every day. That could have been what it
That's
was.
what we think of it.
But that's, yeah. Or it could have been that everybody had to show up every day and take a bath. We don't know. But we just automatically, our modern mindset, we are so big on good versus evil.
Bathing.
You know, I don't like the god of the Nile now. I think I'm gonna go with the god of the sand dunes. I don't like the bathe. Rub yourself down full of dust.
A place where water is incorporated into their religion. What? No.
So
Differences in geography and geology
so
influence the religions? What?
no, it never happens. Silly stuff you're talking about. We always associate it so deeply. We associate so much of our modern interpretation of everything that happened back there with our modern thinking of good versus evil. Good versus evil is such a subjective concept. I'm dressed as somebody who is horribly evil. Actually, we have no idea. We're dressed as somebody who is
Because they're
horrible.
so future, yeah. I don't know.
And well, no, more importantly, is that there's a character written from
my perspective,
the Jedi's are evil. The character is presented as being somewhat amoral. Q is an amoral character. He has something that he must accomplish. Going with the Star Trek Next Generation cycle that they did, starting with Q, ending with Q, it's about trying to help humans become more advanced, to get them humans to think in a different fashion, to quit seeing things as linear and start seeing things as fluid, as concepts like time. Suddenly, all this time that Q has looked like an evil bastard in every episode he's been, actually what he is an arrogant bastard who is trying to convince these primates to think different, to basically follow the Apple mentality, think different, but to evolve into something more than what they are. So is he evil or good at that point? Yeah, so whoever wanted to think of. Well, sure, if you want to go that route with it. It's a phrase I hate, but
Screw up the galaxy. No, we don't do something, they're going to screw it all up.
the other
Hey,
thing is,
everybody else just wants to scrub you guys. I personally don't want to.
wipe them clean.
Yeah.
So for I can't prevent you from wiping you clean, so I'm going to teach you how to not wipe yourself clean. That's the end. That's how the show ends. You know, we're just going to eliminate you all, except for you're not going to. So anyway, the good versus evil thing, and we look at the past. We're looking at and see how all the other stories were told, like Thor and things like these, through modern glasses. We see something different than what they saw in those time periods. The Native Americans had, I love this bit. So white folk come over with the Christian God. and start talking to Native Americans. And eventually, the concept comes up. Wait, you have a book? You have a book that talks about your God? Really? Wait, you talk to your God? Excuse me? No. And they back away slowly. Because from a Native American standpoint, all of these are exceedingly powerful beings that you want to have nothing to do with, because you don't want to risk making one of them angry, because it didn't matter if it was good or bad. You could be talking about the trickster, or you could be talking about life, or you could be talking, no, you didn't mess with these things. But yet we, because our thinking, our Christian thinking, we look at things like a God must obviously be worshipped and sacrificed to, and these things. The Native Americans didn't necessarily do it that way. They sang to them sometimes. They had a concept that they existed, and if you really want to see trippy, go ahead and read some of the Native American mythos. It is actually pretty wild. Especially because some of it's actually more cyclic than we think of things. But again, when we look at it, obviously Rabbit, who is as kind of a trickster of sorts, Coyote, who's a trickster, are evil because they pull pranks. But they weren't really necessarily evil to these guys. They were more along the lines of beings to be concerned about and afraid of and treat with reverence. All of them are to be treated with reverence. See, we miss this, by the way. We miss this entirely in modern society. Christians treat our God with I almost hate to say reverence in some ways. There are those who treat the situation, who treat prayer and these things truly with reverence, truly. And then there are those who go through the process, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, give me what I want. That's what they're really doing. But even those who treat their God with reverence, when speaking about any other deity, it's a joke. They're not real. They're not the right ones. If they did exist, they're obviously evil. Any number of things. So the Native Americans got it with the, no, you treat all of these with reverence. You treat all of these as if they exist. Because as far as they were concerned, while the Christians are looking at the Native Americans and going, you guys are a bunch of idiots because you believe in rabbits as a god? Really? Seriously? On the other hand, the Native Americans look at their culture and go, man, you guys are scary. You're scary because you don't treat this with the level of reverence we do. We don't talk to these things because it could be angry. See, nowadays, we'll just make fun of everybody else's stuff. And there's a reason for that. A little early, actually, on this part. But part of the reason for that is because of things like this. We have learned to create all of our own gods. We've learned to create all of these things. And oddly enough, here's a question for you. Are these any more or less valid than my belief in a Christian God? I mean, there's tons of these ancient beliefs, tons of these new modern gods that we obviously know somebody just wrote down. But is that more relevant than mine? Is that more real or less real than mine? In 1,000 years, we'll be able to tell a difference. It's kind of a hard question to answer. In fact, actually, it's one of those questions that almost makes you question your own faith for a while. When you think about, wait a minute, in 1,000 years, somebody's actually going to believe Doctor Who was real and saved the galaxy over and over?
Well,
Universe?
That depends on what's left of our culture.
Well, that of course being
How
This is
diligently
only
they
like
preserve all
5%
of
left
this.
of whatever was there is what the guess is from what when cultures are dug up, when they find things, they don't find the entire culture just sitting there. There has to be something like massive, like Pompeii burying the dang thing in ash and everything, and even then you just have a snippet.
In fact, actually, we may be at a unique juncture for cultures, because we're one of the first fully documented cultures. When I say that, I mean Harvey, for instance, posts on Facebook.
Yeah.
Snapshots of Harvey's life exist from the beginning of the first day he was on Facebook forward.
Yeah.
The question becomes, does that remain? There's actually projects that exist right now to try and save as much of Harvey's information as possible. That should scare you.
But the internet is a specialized situation. You have to have a computer, you
With
have to have
electricity.
code, you have to have all these things in order to access it. So if there was a disaster,
And that
and
becomes one of the
that
big things.
was, and that specialized knowledge was gone, what would they find? Here's this metal melted thing, and we don't know what it was used for. It's a paperweight.
Yes.
Oh, they worship
Well,
this thing.
obviously, these shiny discs were using some sort of signaling device.
They're like, oh, our ancestors were morons. They just held them in the air and flashlight on them, and that was their signal system.
They shine the Batman.
How many doctors did they have?
Apparently, they only had 12 doctors in their entire existence. They kept, this guy and this guy and this guy. Yeah.
Yeah,
wonder
no,
they were so
and
sick
you
all
bring
the
up a great and valid point.
No wonder healthcare costs so much.
There was only 12 of them.
And you had to
Standalone.
and you had to track him down through space and time. I broke my arm. Where is he? 1873.
But I'm confused. We keep seeing these things, and he never heals anybody. But yes, only a small percentage, and even the 5% statement is so wildly wrong. Not saying that you're wrong. Is that our understanding of what we get out of, for instance, archaeological and anthropological study of an area? What we actually get out of it is so fantastically wrong, because we don't actually know, and we're
it's
having
based on our culture too.
yes, because we pollute everything we touch with our ideas. As archaeology and anthropology has moved forward to become more of a science, and because at one time, let's face it, archaeology was mainly just grave robbing.
Yeah.
Slightly
and
better.
putting the trophies in your museum to show off.
Yes.
How long to you?
Or that guy's museum because he handed you $5,000 for it, where nobody will ever see it again. We pollute all of our ideas with our, all of the viewing of something past with our own ideas. So one of the things of anthropology nowadays is to learn to try and separate that worldview that you currently have and try and understand their worldview a lot better. And someday we might get close to actually being good with it. Again, one of those things, I've got a number of friends that for this part of the conversation would be awesome to have sitting here, because they would have better perspective. Keep in mind, I started to go after my anthropology and archaeology degrees, and then I started traveling the world instead. So the idea of how much we actually retrieve out of a culture because keep in mind, some of these cultures that we see, we've only seen them for a couple of years, and we retrieve what we think, maybe 5%. The problem is we think maybe 5%, because that implies that we actually know the extent of the knowledge and understanding of these cultures, so that we can quantify that we only know 5% of the whole. When in reality, we've bit the side of an elephant, and we're looking at it going, there's got to be at least 1% of the elephant. We're so close to the elephant, we can't actually see the scale, size, or the fact it's going to hit us in a moment. We can't see all of these things. So we got nothing. So in the future, if you get, picking on Dr. Who and the Whovians and all that, in the future, if somebody finds little blue box idols in part of the houses that they go into.
Like mine.
I got a keychain.
There.
So you got a
Covers
port.
love it.
You got a. Not only do you
Yeah.
have a porta idol, you got a wearable idol.
Well, there's
So-
that, yeah.
And
This is gonna be gone though. It's
you're wearing
cloth, it's gonna rot.
that's a good point. That's a good point. Well, you say that. You say that. Actually, you never know what happens with preservation on things like that.
No,
can,
it could fall into some, I don't know, silicone sealer or something, but
no, it's literally the weirdest things happen sometimes, and we get anthropology and archaeology has gotten the weirdest clues and contexts from the oddest things. So, we you brought up Pompeii.
yeah.
Some of the bodies that were found were really just pretty much ash. Some of them actually were petrified because they were inside, were not affected by the heat, and were instead actually suffocated where they were and petrified because they were.
Zero oxygen.
No,
Yeah. So, including poop. There's poop from that time period.
and they can actually get that into a microscope and figure out what even the pollen in the air was like.
Mhm.
Now,
And actually,
if they hadn't, if they haven't already destroyed that possibility with their other hand.
well, that's always a problem too, and that's one of the reasons why the processes behind it are getting more refined and less hands-on, and more. Okay, can we just scan this area of dirt first with the how's the name of it?
Not a radar.
It's ground-based radar,
Ground
basically.
penetrating sonar. is what it is.
Thank you.
It's sonar,
Not radar.
sound.
Yes,
It's sound, not radio wave.
shotgun shells. Let them up and fire them in there.
That's from the vibration. You
But-
scream it into the ground.
Oddly enough,
Say it.
that's
This
so
is
metal.
dinosaur bones. It's over 9,000 over here.
Seriously,
Yes.
really? I said no anime.
It's not anime.
He's
That
not
is
discussing them as gods. He just made a joke.
That or he's going after memes as gods now. I don't know. So if we had a great cataclysm of some sort that wiped out most technology on Earth, then we would be looking at a completely different thing. You're right, because then we would only be looking at a small sliver, a small slice.
But we don't also have to have it be completely a cataclysm, though. How many people use 8 tracks?
Actually, here's the thing about it, because this was Vince Cert. Vince Cert is one of the guys. You can basically call him the grandfather of the internet, if you like.
Okay.
Vince Cert put out an article. I just rolled my eyes. It's one of the few times I've rolled my eyes because it's one of the few times I've ever seen the guy miss the point. Commodore 64 and the floppies that go with it. They're all gone. They're toast. They're gone. Except for the entire archive of it exists online, and you can emulate it. 8-track tapes and things like that. There have already been people who are. We underestimate humanity. We underestimate exactly how insane we truly are. Because somebody thought, you know what? I have the record version of Convoy, and I've got the 8-track tape version. You know, they're not. And the 8-track tape version, they don't sound exactly the same. How can I scan these things in to get the maximum fidelity out of it so that somebody later in the future can listen to and hear the difference between these? Oh, and I'm going to have to do my entire collection. Dang. That's what humans do. We have people who are so obsessed with little facets. The entire archive of everything from Nintendo 64, Super NES, Famicom, etc., are downloadable and accessible.
They need to get the Love Bug Bruce Campbell on DVD.
No, there's some things that have to die.
Moving right along.
There's some things that weren't supposed to exist, and
It's not, my
and
friends.
that's-
Let's move on.
that's some of it. I mean, the reason why I look at it as being a cataclysm would have to occur is because so much of that stuff, including our day-to-day lives, we don't even think about it. So much of that is being backed up into massive archives now. Some of it we're aware of. Some of it we're not actually aware of. Some of it we attribute to shadowy government figures, and some of it is some of it's corporations. Corporations are actually the most likely ones to go away, because when it's sheerly strictly about money, and no academics.
Stop making money.
Yeah, let's face it. If Facebook went broke tomorrow, would anybody really do much of anything with it? Probably not.
There's not going to be an uprising. There's not going to be a movement to save Facebook.
Right. We all go back to MySpace and we call it good.
Okay, MySpace. Screw that.
MySpace is already done toast. Yeah.
I mean, it's still there, but it's funny if you go back.
It's like,
to
wow,
check.
I still have an account there. I don't check it one of these days.
I went just like a couple of weeks ago. I went back just like it popped into my head. It's like, oh yeah, MySpace still exists. But let's go log in and see what's going on. And I went there. It was like, oh my god, it's like Gollum in a cave. Like you cracked the door open, the light came in, and Micey was like, Martian, is that you? Martian, Rush! Like I never stopped getting the emails. Oh God, come back, go do this and that. Seriously.
Oh, Twitter in some ways is almost that bad already.
I don't even know
more
about Twitter because I
users.
was banned. I was auto banned on my first tweet, so I don't even know. So I tweeted you.
Yeah, I can remember with Troll. Yes, and he was banned, and it was good.
Tweet I ever tried to tweet. Auto ban. Okay, screw you.
That was amazing.
If I can't control people on Twitter,
So
what's the point?
Twitter actually begs every once in a while. I'm not kidding. If I don't log into it for long enough, it starts telling me that people might have tweets for me. My favorite being, one day it messaged me and said, "Hey, LeVar Burton has tweets for you." I messaged. I got on Twitter and says something to the effect of, "I don't believe LeVar Burton actually has tweets for me. I think Twitter is just getting
Trying to get you there.
Desperate.
LeVar Burton messaged me back and said, "But what if I did have a tweet for you?"
That would be
Screen capture. That was cool. Yep, it really happened. I love it. Anyways, so all of these things actually, believe it or not, we may be in the future, we may have too much information to a certain degree. Harvey, for instance, talks so much that we will have to sift out what's important and what's not. He talks
But
about
it's all
all
important.
this.
That he says.
So somebody who's answering the question, what was the most prevalent religion during time period? His information would go into a pool with a whole bunch of other stuff, and you start querying against it, and you try and find all the physical objects may actually be less important in some ways than the online objects for a while. But as long as we don't have something that turns most of this into slag, we'll probably have this still another 500 or 1,000 years. Probably. Who knows? There could be a robot uprising and we wipe all the hard drives. Who knows? To laugh. I've seen Terminator.
Or Caprica, the V world becomes robots and get souls and
There you go. That's a little weird. Which of course brings up the idea. You mentioned that one. That's kind of funny because in a way, later on, somewhere down the line, the concept of souls that we have now is very different, vastly different than the concept that used to exist of what we were.
Mm-hmm.
What is this otherworldly thing that we carry around us? What is that that's beyond us? And scientifically, we say it doesn't exist, and it does exist, and it doesn't exist. Oddly enough, there is a quantum physics theory. I read it, and my brain hurt when I read it. That says, "Hey, actually, we may have souls." How odd. Bless you.
Sorry.
I was wondering if the hat actually echoes all of that void space. Okay, for anybody who hears me a lot picking on her hat, you have to understand she has a Doctor Who stocking cap. So it's pretty awesome, to be quite frankly. I would never wear one because it wouldn't go.
1 hour and 45 minutes. It took you to reference it.
No, I picked on it a couple of times, just not directly. I kept picking on Doctor Who stuff instead of saying the actual hat. And we did discuss the hat and whether or not the hat would survive, be preserved in the event of a cataclysm. So yes, it did take me a while to actually work it in. I am so getting off. I'm way off. That's all right. Marshall, do you care to share with us?
This is a baseball article. I don't.
How
watch
long
baseball,
ago?
but I don't know.
Wow. And that's why Marshall's not allowed to work for a newspaper. Anyways, okay. So our modern view of all of these. Oh, are you all right, Marshall? You look like you're going to explode at this point. And I know it can't be good because your wife is looking at the
I don't get the connotation.
It's a candle holder.
Yeah, it's just, yeah. We'll explain later. We'll explain later. Anyways, so our view, I think, causes our modern takes on these guys, because even the revisionism even occurs, you know, as are you okay?
You know what I got?
As Caleb pointed out, the modern view of Jesus being blue-haired, blue-eyed, blonde hair, blue-eyed, blue-haired, that blue-haired punk Jesus. Mohawk. I like this idea, actually. You don't have me feel like offended with that. We reinterpret all the time. Sometimes we tell the stories with other people's names involved. Or sometimes we even take existing stories and just turn them upside down and parallel them in together. Has anybody here read Lamb?
Wait, what?
Lamb, Christopher Moore's Lamb, Lamb. It's the lost book of Biff. Biff
Are
was.
we getting into Back to the Future?
Oh no! This is so much better than that. Biff was the 13th apostle. It's a childhood friend of Jesus's, and this is the adventure of him and Jesus as Jesus is growing up to become who he becomes down the line, including Jesus has to know how everything works in the world, but he can't be sinful. So it's Biff's job to go be sinful. What a friend, right? What a guy. Also, you know, shows Jesus going off with him and Biff and experiencing other religions and things like this, which oddly enough, now here's the cool thing about the story, is if you read it, the first thing that will strike you when you get done is this guy knew his Bible stuff, really knew his stuff. Not only that, he also understood the ancient religions of the time very well. Do I have to take that? He understood religion very well. He understood the religions that existed at the time period. He including sewing in bits and pieces of non-canonical Bible books, like Timothy wrote of Jesus' life when he was little. And I can't remember the name of the book.
Jesus hears a who.
What? I like it though. So he took and he sewed all this mythology together into one book. That's just a little paperback book. It's actually a throwaway brain candy sort of book in a lot of ways. To the point though, there has been a couple of colleges that have taught courses based around this book because of how it weaved all this stuff in together. And this is how we reinterpret things. Because let's face it, from a modern standpoint, the four gospels would not get traction in the modern world from the standpoint of storytelling. But seriously, I mean, we would not, without somebody previously having said, you got to read this because this is how I live my life, or this is how you should live your life, or this is a really cool story, bro, that somebody thinks that they should have their lives lived like this, or any number of things. The Gospels themselves are actually really small. And they really don't tell a whole lot about this one guy who's supposed to be a central character. We don't find out a whole lot about him. In fact, to find out more about him, we reinterpret the Old Testament a little bit, and then we add in some stuff that some guy who was writing very angry letters to other churches sewed together. Mm-hmm. And when we put all this together, then we get something at least large enough to read. It's something more than a pamphlet. Biff showed the story of Biff. Lamb ends up showing an alternate way of telling that same story, but oddly enough, still coming up with the same conclusion. This is what the cool part was, is in the end, it's still the same conclusion, except for you had a 13th guy who accidentally ended up killing himself, and comes back in the future. Yeah, it's really, and yes, there was time travel involved with that eventually. Well, actually, not time travel.
This cane and somebody's car.
No. So we take these things and we take them all that way. So it's one of the reinterpretations in the way we deal with all this. In fact, the funny part is I have seen people who have written reinterpretations of the Bible itself to try and flesh it out, to pull what little cultural hints we know. And my favorite being that there is
Thomas Jefferson.
Well, Thomas Jefferson did it with an opposite direction with it, which was anything that was a miracle, he cut out. Which doesn't
And it is the Gospels.
Yes. Which oddly enough, it loses very little meaning. It loses almost no meaning when you take the miracles out. It's kind of interesting how that works, because they weren't important to what Jesus was talking about. They weren't important to his actual actions, except for one poor fig tree and some really well-fed people. Really didn't matter. Poor fig tree. What did they ever do?
Vegas.
So what?
Cyril Vegas.
Ah, dang, I'm losing my spot again. Yep, it's gone. Oh, going back to the key point. We continue to create all these new mythos and new pantheons, and some of them somewhere 1,000 years from now, somebody's going to look at some of these and they're still going to exist. They're still going to be around, for better or worse. And anthropologists are going to look at it and they're going to actually have a pretty good understanding of what happened. Probably. They'll probably have gotten to the point they understand the difference between a story that's just a moral and a religious point. There is a difference in the way things are usually delivered, but not always.
And how much of the parable do we take as fact
Yeah.
nowadays?
Well, and I mean, I say this without coming out an ass.
You're in the queue, so you can get away with it.
Yes, okay, fine, good point. So, when somebody reads Marvel Comics, thousands of years from now, and follow the exploits of Thor, they're, you know, I pity those who are literalists in its translation, because it may tell a story, it may tell a moral, good versus evil, it may tell the idea of this, that, and the other. Because believe it or not, comic books still have a moral, an idea that they're trying to push forward, that good succeeds over evil more often than not, that love is stronger than hate, that, and a lot of these things, well, actually the Bible tends to say the same thing, just whether or not we want to take it all literally, that becomes the real key issue then. And
So what we take away from Sodom and Gomorrah
may or may not be real. But and that is up to each person to decide. I'm not going to say what I feel is direct written and what is not, because I would be wrong. I would be absolutely wrong. Paul's letters, are they be taken literally? I don't know. I didn't write them. I did not sit down and write these things. I have also not heard or been commanded to do something about them. I have not been, God has not spoke to me and said, you know what you have to do? Tell everybody that this is right or this is wrong. I never had that happen. It'd be great. It'd be kind of handy. It'd be nice to have a guidepost that sort of way. Kind of like, you know what you really ought to not do? Don't dress up as cute. Things like that. No, I can't say what's literal and what's not, what should be taken. All I can do is myself as an analytical person walk away with these stories and look at them and go, you know what? They all have great morals. I do sincerely believe in the existence of this guy over here, Jesus. I've got no problem believing in his existence. I've got no problem believing that the Gospels have got to at least be somewhat true, because there are some little signposts in history that exist. He was hung, we know that, on a cross, or actually on a tree, as it were. We know that one. The Romans made fun of him with graffiti about 90 years later. We know that he existed through the mention in a name. So we've got some little things that, yeah, okay, exists. Don't have to go on faith. But I think most of those are pretty right. Old Testament, I look at the books of Moses and I go, yeah, that's probably pretty close to right, at least. I mean, well, some margin of error, probably. But modern storytelling does have always given me just a moment of room of doubt. Because later on, 1,000 years from now, will somebody be looking at the same thing and going, this Q guy, do we still worship him?
This magic whiteboard.
I was not even thinking of it in this context. That's awesome, actually. And a little disturbing at the same time. But the point being, it's something to think about, though, when we start looking at other people's religions and start washing our hands of them, saying, well, if they believe that, obviously they believe everything.
they're being deceived.
Right. And even the Bible doesn't preclude the existence of other gods. We're not supposed to follow them. Us who call ourselves followers of Christ should not be following these guys. It doesn't say they don't exist. Doesn't even, there's even a couple of outs, if you want to get ultra academic, and I'm not going to get into this today, there's even some other outs for the existence that God knows of the existence of certain other gods. If you were here for last week, I talked about the Baal, various Baal and things like that. They're mentioned in the Bible. There was no thing that these guys are, with one exception, one major exception. For the most part, they weren't even pointed at as being false. False idols was a big deal because idol worship is a different thing.
And how did Paul and Barnabas react to being called Mercury and?
Yeah, they did not happy about that.
But they didn't say, well, that's wrong. They were just saying it's wrong to deduce that we are them.
Yes.
They didn't say, well, that's false. And
That is an interesting point too. So the point being, I do the whole thing for peace, love, and respect. Understanding that somebody else's point of view hopefully allows us to respect other people. Looking at modern gods and realizing that we create all these things. If we have a belief in something that's a higher power, after reading Terry Pratchett's Discworld, if we still maintain our own beliefs and we can read something like that, we shouldn't be looking down upon somebody else's beliefs. Now, I'm not going to get into the debate of whether or not we should draw depictions of Muhammad, because I've already gone over that with the Charlie Hebdo one. I'm not saying we shouldn't. Respect means, I'm trying to find the best way of saying this, respect meaning, if I can believe this, that guy can believe that. It's okay. If I believe this, then there's nothing wrong with him believing that. It's up to him. If the Bible is right, then it's up to him later on to answer for whatever he does. But yeah, I'm starting to ramble now. My brain has checked out. Apparently that's happening. I can overheat you eventually. But yeah, anyways, so we need to approach these things with a little bit more respect. You know, if somebody says they follow Wiccan gods, well, I'm going to use that word as an example. If somebody says they follow the god and goddess, okay, well, I follow God. So mine's this name and yours is what's okay, great, and move on. It's not a big deal. We don't have to tell them they're going to burn in hell. Don't forget, if that's what's going to happen, that's what's going to happen. That's for them to choose. They already know this. They've already been told this. They have stories that already tell them this. It's not new information. If somebody tells me that they follow the flying spaghetti monster, well, one, I know they're pulling my leg. As far as I know, nobody actually takes it as a serious religion. There is a religion of it, but nobody takes it as a serious religion. It is a parody of sorts. So
The Pastafari.
that's right. May his noodly appendage touch you and bless you, and provide you with meatballs. But yeah, so anyways, respect. I mean, it can't be that hard. We have to quit making fun of everybody else's belief, or at least, well, not okay. We can make fun of other people's beliefs. Let's just say we shouldn't be telling everybody else that their beliefs don't exist, that they're wrong because I believe this. And obviously, my really cool story that I follow
is better than your story that you follow.
Right.
Yeah.
So, anyways, that's it for today. Because, like I said, my brain is checked out about 5 minutes ago. So if you just hit that button anytime that you want,
The Q button?
the Q button, yes.
now you need to spark and